Derek Varn, I think this whole idea of doing this started with a conversation we were having in our group chat. Would you like to give your opinion on what's wrong with the kids today?
Where to start? I like to
We got
start
a
off.
timer on you because this is like the Oscars, by the way.
Okay, go. So bunch of things. General illiteracy worldwide has increased, although it's worse in the United States. Boys under 24 aren't going to college. Our trade school, that's actually a bigger deal than going to college. I don't care about making liberal namby-pamby people, but them not going to trade school actually is worrying. 1/8 of men between the ages of 24 and 32 basically don't seem to have friends, don't have a job, don't have a partner. Suicidal ideation has increased amongst all genders in the cohort under 35. In fact, it's increased in the U.S. kind of a little bit astronomically in the past 20 years. So according to the Yale School of Medicine, suicidal attempts amongst the ages of 10 to 24 has increased 62% since 2007. And it at first, when I started pointing this out about a decade ago, actually, I got a bunch of millennial hipster types telling me that I was being alarmist and that it was just going back to his historical norm of the suicide rates of the 70s, which, great time for the youth, the 70s. So there's that. Illiteracy rates in the United States have gone up again dramatically. 40% of people under 35 can't read at even a 5th grade level. 70% if you are impoverished. That's new. Now, that trend has gone up worldwide. The youth all over the world read less well than they used to. Some will say it's a new skill. But the other thing that's happened, and this is not just amongst the youth, this is in entire society, is media literacy rates have dropped profoundly.
But if Viana comes in.
So there is a ton to deal with just with that. Anecdotally, so this is not stats, ideology is almost divided as much among class and region now, but also gender. Gender is a huge division amongst young people and their ideology. It's the most profound in people under 23. Zoomer boys, actually, the stats on this are wild. They were identifying with Trump about a month ago, but then recent stats have indicated that they've all given up the ghost and just have total despair now. Which, I guess that's what happens when you buy into a pipe dream. And if you go, oh, well, this is mostly white people. One of the most interesting statistics for me is in prior generations of people, suicidal ideation was rare amongst the poor and amongst underprivileged groups. Guess what? That's not true anymore. The Black suicide rate for young people has increased 144% in the past 15 years. And that was before the pandemic, actually. We haven't actually done a good adjustment post-pandemic, and all these stats have gone up since then. Latin suicide rates have gone up, and again, prior to the 2010s, this was kind of unheard of. Suicide rates amongst the poor and amongst marginalized groups was really, really low. At least among the youth. And that's not true anymore either. But what's even weirder is comorbidities for suicide in adults are actually less prevalent in people under 21. So for example, young kids, we can't accuse them of drinking too much. They don't seem to have promiscuous sex. That would probably involve actually meeting people. you know, we haven't gotten the Gen Z is killing everything off articles because I guess the baby boomers are dying and actually also think that all people under 50 look alike or whatever, so they can't tell us apart. But we have seen a lot of like disengagement from social media. I actually think that'd be a good thing. Disengagement from dating apps and whatnot, probably because they don't have the money for it. They're all super expensive now. And an increased usage of video game time. And I'm not anti-video game. I'm not here to come after the gamers. But it's not a particularly social hobby. So that's just the baseline of why I actually think we had to talk about this. And the other thing, I got tired of elder millennials telling my younger Gen X ass that that the youth were our future and they should give us hope until, you know, the youth didn't vote the way they thought and now they're freaking out. So I'm also going to chastise that generation too. I also think the generational monikers are a little bit misleading, and so they give the people who are like generational talk is bullshit. It's not entirely, as I've said before, age is a material condition. But for example, if we talk about the politics of Zoomers, you can split them down the middle on who's more likely to be reactionary amongst men. If they're under 23, they're way more likely to express, you know, conservative or super conservative opinions. And if they're over 24, they're way more likely to be woke, progressive, annoying types. And my experience with teaching kids right now backs this up. So it does seem like it's a hyper-reactive generation. Now, I'm not here to. We'll talk about. I'm not. You know, I don't want to start off the show with like, here's my reasons why I think this is happening, and I actually don't think it's like a character flaw in the youth that they chose. So people can lay off of that. I think we actually do have to look at this in a systemic way and say this is not entirely their fault. But the other thing that worries me is we have a generation that feels like they have no future. And they felt like that when the economy was better and there was decent job prospects for them. I say decent because the jobs were shit, and we'll get to that too. But they at least had jobs. This generation has no memory, for the most part, of the Great Recession, or the period of recessions from the 70s through the early aughts. They just don't know it, and their parents, yeah. And their parents don't do that either. So, and lastly, yeah, people are saying it. Executive function has been declining now for 40 years. When I first was learning how to teach, we were told we had research that the average student had a 15-minute executive function, which was down from the executive function pre-television. And I don't know how much to take these studies before the 1960s, but they did exist, of about 30 minutes. Today, the executive function average is about 3 minutes. So that's 3 minutes.
It's like 2 reels.
Yeah, it's 2 reels basically. And what that means is the ability to sustain attention to follow information is gotten very short. I know I sound like Neil Postman talking about this in the 80s when he was complaining about, you know, sound bits and whatnot, but that's universal. And what's interesting about that, before they come at me about the youth, that's happening to everybody. So all generations are showing executive function decline. And it's the worst in the United States because, you know, most things that affect the developed world are worse in the United States, but it's happening all over too. There's evidence of it happening in Sweden and in Scandinavian countries, which means you can't blame phonics or just the American education system. It is something larger than that. And I'm going to stop off on that time.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that point there, because I really want to highlight this point. As Varn was saying, you know, often this is portrayed in the kind of generational struggle thing. And, you know, we have every generation, you know, talking about the youth of today, et cetera, et cetera. It goes back, right back to the ancient times. But the really critical point that I think Varn is making, at the moment, is that this is a general issue. Oh, hello, little Viana. Okay, I'll get you some. No, but that is happening on all generations at the moment. It's happening, and if you see studies of older generations, you're seeing a decline in attention spans, which is not just about cognitive decline in old age. It's about the sort of technological superstructure that we are operating within in our society, which is undermining people's attention spans. Obviously, this is going to affect the youth the most, as they've been raised in almost entirely inside this kind of TikTok world. But I don't think it can be exclusively put down to a question of the youth. It's happening on a complete societal level, and you see people talk about it anecdotally. People will say things like, I used to read like 3-4 books every few months. Now I don't read a book in the entire year because of all these distractions. I mean, social media is addictive. There's science to show that it's addictive, and everyone to a certain degree has been fundamentally transformed. I mean, you look back to the 90s when people used to, the boomer generation used to worry about their kids believing everything they read on the internet. And now you get to a situation where you have all this boomer AI stuff, which people are pointing at.